Hello and welcome to the New York Jewish Film Festival. The festival is presented by the Jewish Museum and Film at Lincoln Center annually in January. I'm Indigo Sparks, a member of the selection committee, and I am so excited to welcome you to this discussion of Tiger Within. I'm here with the director, Rafal Zielinski, and the writer, Gina Wendkos. First of all, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much for having us and for watching the film. It's a real honor. You know, smaller independent films don't get as much exposure as we hope they do. So we're very honored that you watched the film.
Of course, I found it to be very endearing and shocking and relatable in surprising ways. So maybe you guys could start by telling us how you decided to create the film, what kind of drew you to tell this story, like how it all came together.
Yes, I read the script. Gina gave me the script because we have a background. We had done a previous film that was at Sundance that I directed, that Gina wrote. So we were friends, and she gave this script into my lap, and I was so touched by the script and have tried to make it for many years, and it's gone through many incarnations. But what attracted me to the script, apart from the wonderful writing and the amazing, development of the two characters and all the emotion and the wisdom and the truth in the script, what attracted me was the idea of forgiveness. And I researched the subject matter quite extensively by talking to a lot of people from all kinds of backgrounds, religions, philosophers, intellectuals. And what's so beautiful about this story is that, Samuel gives a compassionate forgiveness to this girl. He has a lot of anger and pain and poison that he carries. And, forgiveness is very medicinal, and a lot of people practice it for almost selfish reasons to cure themselves. He goes beyond that. He reaches out to this girl and he understands her. He understands that, like a lot of people in this country and across the world, we haven't, had the luxury of being exposed to a lot of cultures, history. A lot of people have come from very limited backgrounds, very narrow backgrounds. And that doesn't make them bad human beings. It's just that they haven't had the luck or the parents or whether it's the spirituality or religion or parents injecting this into them or history or philosophy or psychology. They just haven't had those gifts given to them. So they are, stuck in a very narrow view. And that's how a lot of this hatred and, racial division breeds. And he sees this, he understands this girl, he understands her parents, and he rises above it. And as well as trying to heal himself, he reaches out unconditionally to her. And I think that's the beginning of how humanity should be working. If we start, reaching out in a deeper way, then I think the world hopefully will be a better place. And such horrors as the Holocaust won't ever happen again.
Couldn't agree more. So as viewers, we're kind of subtly introduced to Samuel right before Casey is. So I'm curious about why you kind of chose to introduce him in that way.
Gina.
Well, it's the transformation comes from Casey. She impacts Samuel, but when we need to see how broken the child is, and we all know as viewers that a child that angry is just going to grow up to be more hateful unless there's some sort of stopgap, and Samuel's that stopgap. But we need to, I felt that I had to draw Casey as not that she is a stupid person, but she acts stupid, and she's stupid from a lack of education and a lack of interaction. I mean, that's the thing about New Yorkers. There's so many cultures there that we are forced to interact with. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, that I never experienced anti-Semitism in New York ever. And I am, because we are more sophisticated by being in a room with all the different voices and all the different languages. And we see them as our equals. I mean, hopefully we do. There's other parts of the world, I mean, other parts of the country, which they call the flyover, but nonetheless, those people they haven't met. I mean, my ex-husband's mother had never met a Jew. So, I mean, and they're in Pennsylvania. So, when they don't meet people and recognize other faiths, races, behaviors as human, we become very distant to them. And so I needed to show Casey as coming from that abyss of just ignorance. And ignorance can be cured, and just by somebody that is willing to take the hate, because she is hateful. And most people, when they come across somebody that hateful, it's just, who wants to take the time to, like life is hard enough. Who wants to deal? And he deals, and he deals for his own reasons. And that's why Samuel comes in later, because we need to be invested in Casey as a story to see that her transformation is genuine.
Yeah, and Casey hasn't, it was very evident to me, right? And that she hasn't experienced a lot of kindness either, no. Right? Like hate begets hate. Totally. And so she, we don't really see any of that behavior around her. And Samuel teaches her a number of things, kindness for kindness sake, the importance of self-love and self-respect. He never tries to make a fool of her, even throughout her ignorance and hateful behavior. But, it's such a delicate balance that I felt watching the two of them interact on screen. Like at some point you kind of feel, okay, at some point he's just going to get sick and tired of this little girl throwing all this, a mess at him. But what was it like, I feel that Margot and Ed did so amazing, and I'm curious about what it was like to work with them and playing that balancing act.
Margot was 14, first of all, and she had her own history, and she was at that age when we met her where she was just beginning to experience life outside of school a tiny bit, and she had questions, and she really, this opened her eyes. She had, they don't teach that much in school anymore about all these horrors. I mean, it's covered maybe minimally, but she on her own researched it, and she was like on set, she'd say, really, they did that? Really, they did that? And, it was a lot of kids that, first of all, I've met kids that don't even believe it happened. So that's what fascinated me the most. And that exactly what you said, where that, and he almost got there, that breakfast scene, which is my favorite scene, where he almost lost it when he told her mother is wrong. Because even though she and her mother are at odds on probably everything, there's still that little girl in her that believes mama, and mama is wrong, and that's the first time I think that shows Ed's gift, that he was able to still not be hateful towards her, but just go, oh my God, this child, So yeah, that's the closest he came to just wanting to smash her, but he didn't.
And also, as a director, I come from a documentary background, and I made sure that on this film I would sort of stand back and wouldn't over direct them, let them flow very naturally. And they're almost like the two real things. Ed has family who died in the Holocaust. She's a complete newcomer, didn't even know very much about the Holocaust, very little, and she was the real thing. So it was like capturing two real things, two real people who are just the characters very much, and not over manipulating the performance, not overstaging it in a mannered way. You know, I come from the cinema verite film school run by Richard Leacock when I was at MIT, and him and Pennebaker, you know, started this whole cinema verite movement. And he told me, no, you got to be like a fly in the corner of the room. That's what you are as a filmmaker, and that's how you get the best life, the reality happening in front of your camera. So I was trying to apply that very much. And also, you know, we had to work super fast because this was an ultra low budget film. And also we were working with 14-year-old child performer. So there were a lot of lows we had to follow. We could only work 5 hours with her. So we had to work super fast, and there was very little rehearsal time. So we just like let it flow, you know, very often, and captured the moment. And I think that's the strength of, you know, what we got.
Well, I felt watching it, like it did come across very naturalistic to me. I don't know if I was feeling connected to Casey's like 14-year-old angst, or like thinking back to arguments I've had with my mother, or, you know, just coming from a place of just genuinely not understanding and thinking you have it all figured out. Like that's that age, right? You're kind of starting to take that turn. But in the film, there were a few, she has these like really specific moments of joy that spark for her a little bit, or where she kind of starts to come alive, right? And the first one that I noticed was actually when she removed the swastika, when she painted over the swastika over the coat, and she came back in and she was like, see, you know, like, look at me. I was like, oh, okay. And you know, and then to moments that she kind of, there are a few moments she has with Tony when she's experiencing consent and care, all right, and moving slow. But one in particular that stood out to me was when her interest in the photographer, Diane Arbus, I believe it is.
Arbus,
and Arbus, yes. And so that's kind of the first topic, it seems, you know, that as far as school is concerned, where she's like, like, let me take an interest in this person. And she's an American photographer. So I'm curious if you could expand on just like the significance of that connection.
Well, I think that, first of all, the scene you bring up with the swastika was powerful for me because it was the first moment that she crossed the bridge to Samuel, that she gave. And in order to give, you know, once you give anything, you're vulnerable. And it was the first time that she had empathy towards somebody else's feelings, because she was so hard. And those kids become hard because their feelings are so ignored. And so slowly she becomes more curious about the world around her, and realizes, of course, that it's a bigger world than the spite that she grew up in. And the fear, I mean, you know, the fear and the hatred comes from this limited viewpoint of everybody's against me. And once she realizes maybe everybody isn't against me, she starts to find value in other people, including obviously Ed. I mean, Samuel, his viewpoint on life, his philosophy, and looking at these photographs and realizing that people that are not presented as perfect have value. And it gave her a sense of, okay, there's a world out there that I might belong to.
Right. And I was attracted, you know, to Diane Arbus's work because, you know, all the films I've done always seem to be about misfits and rebels and outsiders. And maybe I find myself a little bit of that. And, you know, so I think, you know, that touched me. And I think the fact that, you know, she sees herself as a misfit too, and she realizes that there is value in her through the, you know, this wonderful photographer's work, who had a very troubled, you know, life. I mean, she committed suicide. So, you know, there is a connection there, you know, which was I think, deeper and on many levels interesting to explore.
Yeah. So Casey, she has found herself on the outside. She has considered herself to be the ugly duckling, like self-labeled herself that. She is moving to that beat. And when, you know, she does open herself up to Samuel and become vulnerable, I think as a viewer, she's like made it, right? She's found the home. She understands the importance and the value of chosen family. She understands that it doesn't have to be one way. And then you guys like rip our heart out. And Samuel is, you know, a victim of inexperience that a lot of people go through, a hate crime. And my heart was I was very shocked at that, and very, you know, upset about that whole experience for his sake, and for Casey's sake. I guess I was feeling she had already been through so much, right? So why was it necessary for her to experience this loss?
Well, I think it was, I mean, dramatically it was, because it's one thing to have ugly beliefs, and it's a whole other thing to see the result of the ugly beliefs. And she sees those results by these maniacs, you know, fostered on a man she is the only person that has chosen to love her. And he has chosen to do so, Samuel. And she says at some point, that could have been me doing the banging. And when she realizes, I think it's twofold. One is, somebody I adore is a victim of this. And then on the more internal side, she's like, all the ugly thoughts that I had and all the people I know that have done equally horrible things, I'm part of that cycle. And how easily I could have been the perpetrator, not caring about the victim. And I think once that horror affects you directly, it's very grave on your soul. And aside from hurting somebody that you care deeply for.
Yeah, and I think it's very relevant, to what's going on in this country, because there's a lot of issues, race, guns, politics, and we sort of see it theoretically, we're detached from it, but then it hits us for real, and we are opened up, and we realize that our beliefs maybe are very, they're formulaic, they're not true beliefs. We truly don't get it. And it's a wake-up call. So I think it was a good dramatic device, in the script that was necessary for the audience to experience that. Because, in drama, I look at Shakespeare, you need to see, murder, death, violence. You need all those elements to wake human beings up so they can relate and grow and learn, and, there's too many films where we sort of get very detached and are not really, involved in them. And when we leave them, we forget them really fast. So to make a film somehow grow on you and leave something with you, you need some strong dramatic, turns in the story. And I think Gina did that exactly correctly. It was necessary for the story to have the power that it does. And unfortunately, Ed passed away. It was almost like, it was strange. It was filming that scene, and filming that hospital scene, we felt, when I was filming that scene, I felt, this is going to happen and could happen quite soon. There was a sort of a melancholy feeling of filming that scene. And we're very sad, to have him go, because I wish for him to have been part of this. He cared so much about this film. He gave it so much love and time, and he really believed in the message of the film. I mean, he did it it wasn't about money. There was very little money. He really believed in this film and its message.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean, I think the overall message too of like courage and empathy and love and no fear, right, until the very end. It was a part of the film that made me realize, like, oh, right, of course, like, this is life, right? This is what happens. And when you are a part of a marginalized group, right, you can find yourselves in these situations, and even the most caring and empathetic and loving, right, person can find themselves in this place. So it was very powerful.
Yeah, he's not impervious just because he has his own internal adjustment, a new view on how to get rid of the anger. I mean, I think it also came from, if I were in the Holocaust, I don't think I could ever forgive. That's just not my nature. I don't think I ever could. And I don't know that Rafal's bigger on the forgiveness element than I am. For me, it wasn't that he forgave as much as he promised his wife he would learn not to hate everybody. And I don't know that I ever would be able to open up enough when he saw what he saw in the cemetery and has that turnaround of like, I'm going to go back there. I mean, I can't even imagine like when I see kids, and they're just like, they don't even know what they're talking about, or, they're wearing Doc Martens. They don't know what that represents. It still is very offensive to me, and it's as much as I think they're cool looking shoes, I know what they stand for, and it bothers me. And so for him to be able to turn around, having seen that image, there was something that pulled him. Was it curiosity? Was it the promise he made? It's layered for why he turned around, and to hold in the contempt to say, look who's sleeping here, whereas my soul, I feel like, what would keep me from kicking this kid? Well, it's like, it's that battle of, you want to rise above your own venom. And in our higher self, it'd be great to be able to be Ed or to be Samuel and sit on the rock and disassociate from the horror.
Well, yeah, I think you've made a very good point. Layered. I think that's why this script and the movies has power, because it's layered, and every audience member can see it to a different level or a different aspect of it. But ultimately, it has this beautiful enlightening message, which I think will leave people with more light than they came in.
Yeah, because he doesn't weaponize any of his experience. He doesn't, you know what I mean? He doesn't weaponize it, and he's battling.
He doesn't use it to be like, oh, the world's been bad to me,
Right.
No.
Right.
He carries it deep inside.
And especially the scene where he goes to visit her parents, he's very restrained and compassionate. He could blow up. I mean, he could have just, attacked that guy, the boyfriend. I mean, like, he could have, and he didn't. And that
was my urge.
So. Yeah, no, both of us, you and I, we're both in the minority group. I mean, people are going to see you and they're going to be careful not to say whatever if they have evil in their heart. But so I'm not going to say a lot of times, but it has happened because they don't think, or they don't know I'm Jewish, and they'll say something in front of me. And because it's not as obvious, and you just go, okay, what should I do? Do I blow this dinner up? or wherever it is. And they think it's like a small thing. Like they'll say something like, yeah, I went and looked at refrigerators, I tried to Jew them down, but I ended up paying more than I wanted to, something that they think is so mild. And you go, all right, okay, how do I respond? And that's just part of the language that's out there. And that has to be, that has to be confronted.
Well, there is another layer to the film, the illustrations. They were so touching and an unexpected thread, right, throughout the story for me. So could you talk about, kind of how you came to that decision to include them?
Yeah. Actually, it was strange because, this happened very spontaneously halfway through the film. We were filming a scene and the costume wardrobe assistant was sitting in the corner in between takes, sort of writing in a little diary. And I glanced at the diary and there was this amazing drawing. And I said, wow, this is so interesting. Can I flip through it? Can I have your permission? And I flipped through it, it was like Casey's diary, with all these sort of angry faces and many colors of this self-portraits and all kinds of poetry and very heartfelt feelings, And I said, well, can we incorporate this into the movie? It's still not too late. So we hadn't filmed the big scenes like in her bedroom. So we then started coming up with the idea that she's an artist, that's what her natural talent is. And we populated her bedroom with these drawings. And then we started incorporating them, whatever scenes were left to do. And especially in the zoo scene, we sent her to do a drawing of the tiger, and she did that like 2 hours before we filmed this scene. So we commissioned her to do more and more drawings. And then my wife, who is an artist, it took this to another level, and she, as we were editing, she created like a few hundred drawings. Then we started sprinkling over the movie, and it gave the movie like a whole different layer where we go inside the heart and soul of Casey, which I think was nice because it gives her more depth. We understand her more. Because we didn't want to use voiceovers, and the scenes were very short and quick. So somehow, seeing her angry drawings just expressed her feelings to a much more deeper way than the limited time that a movie allows you to do that. Like in a novel, where you can go into a whole, inner monologue. This was our version of her sort of inner monologue.
I enjoyed them so much. I like the butterflies, and it felt it was that vulnerability aspect of her, and the self-portraits in particular I found to be really poignant because she is discovering, she's on that self-discovery path. We're always on that, but at her age, she's on that path of self-discovery, and she's literally on a path of self-discovery as she's journeying to a new place and meeting new people. And who am I in the midst of all of this?
Right. So and those drawings looked very much like the actress. That was interesting. Her name was Clara, the costume artist, and she looked a little bit like Casey, and her self-portrait looked like Casey. So that was a magical accident.
Nice. Can we talk about the happy birthday scene at the end? That illustration.
Right. Yeah. That came after we edited the film, and we felt there was something missing. There was one final note missing. So, I asked my wife to draw this to show that she, her life, because some people were questioning, well, what's going to happen to her? Did he leave her, an allowance? Is she back on the street? No, it felt it needed a conclusion to make the film perhaps more mainstream, less of an independent film that leaves you hanging, to give it more closure and make it more of a mainstream, closure ending. So I think that drawing tells it all. And I think I'm so happy we did it in the end. we were testing it, and it really worked.
Yeah, it was that moment of like, oh, okay. Yeah, like I think
Just
Yeah.
gives a feeling of safety.
yeah.
You know, it's not exactly, we don't know, does she move in with them? Does she, whatever, because she's got a long road to go with that family, but the drawing gives us the suggestion that there's been progress there.
And also, we were using this wonderful app that I think it's called Brushes. It memorizes your brush strokes. So Vali had to do this drawing like 20 times because she would get it wrong and had to start all over, because you can't erase it. It only records every brush stroke going forward. You can't go backwards, but it shows the whole process. So it would be like a 2-hour. It would take her 2 hours or 3 hours to do the whole drawing, to outline it and start coloring in. And if she made a mistake, then she was very frustrated. She had to redo it like a number of times till it worked perfectly. But it's a wonderful animation
so satisfying
tool. And actually, David Hockney uses it a lot. He's a champion of this app. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'll ask one final question. We'll wrap it up. But what would you say you both have learned from the process of creating this film, just about, yourselves as individuals, as an artist?
Well, let me start with that. I wrote it in, what was it, 90, 91, something like this. When, it was just a personal story for me. And I never, ever thought that America would be what America is today, or that, I always knew that there were people that were vocal, about their racism, but I never knew that there were so many silent ones that have been allowed to emote and vocalize and proudly state their ignorance. And that I did not know back then. So what I'm so delighted with is that people have responded to the movie, not just as entertainment, which of course as a writer, you don't want to ever bore people, but realizing like, oh, this impacts me right now because of the world we're in right now. So for me, that's what I've gained from doing this movie. Other movies I've done, I love comedy and, and feel good and romance and all that. But this hits it, it's a different instrument in the orchestra is how I feel.
And for myself, it just reinforced the idea that you really have to do some things that matter, that you are passionate about. Because in my past, I had to make some films I didn't want to make, and I'm very embarrassed I actually made them. And in the long run, I wish I just hadn't done them at all, rather not do a movie and not have a career that makes something you don't believe in. So, by doing this film, it sort of, gave me the courage, even if it's very little money. I know none of us got paid. We did it for the love, let's make more movies that, are enlightening, illuminating. And I'm starting a startup called Film Art Planet, and I hope to raise, private money to make more enlightening, illuminating micro-budget films, because life is too short.
Yes, well, that's amazing. Thank you both so much for joining me for this conversation.
You've been a
We are
delight.
Thrilled to have you guys in the festival this year.
Thank you.
Yes, and we'll see you later.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You.
Bye.
Bye-bye.